maybe it's kind of like elevations moving from acute care to palliative care, and that is something really useful that people as their hospice have. Whereas it might, you know, it might not be as, you know, really useful when you're trying to actively treat people using that.
Yes. As it turns out, there are many, many ways in which the act of recognition of a patient is critical. I hope some of you are philosophy majors and remember what Hegel said about recognition, in which any one act of recognition has to be reciprocal. So if I recognize you, you can't help but recognize me. And the more we see this around the hospital, we're trying harder than we used to recognize patients in more entire ways than we used to not just recognize which of the coronary arteries is obstructed, but rather to recognize a whole situation that a patient's in. And so when I meet patients in the hospital, or in the office for the first time, I don't ask them all, you know, sort of technical questions anymore. I just say, tell me what you think I should know about your situation. And that becomes the basis for I think, more illuminated recognition. Because if I leave it up to the person to tell me what they think I should know, I'm apt to know more than if I just went through a checklist of questions. And then the incredible dividend, which I didn't foresee in this, is that I too am recognized in a very profound way. And I will leave the office after seeing 6 or 8 or 10 patients, just feeling so privileged that I get to do it. I mean, I come home, I'll say I saw 9 patients in the office this morning, and then my husband knows a great deal about my patients. It's not a breach of confidentiality at all. It's a means by which I have, and I appreciate the chance he gives me to deepen that which I know about patients. When they call me at home and say, okay, what do you do? If he answers the phone, it's okay. He'll say, oh, Mrs. So-and-so, how's your sister doing? You say. So there are ways in which the recognition is really in widening circles. And we don't have to worry quite the same way about privacy and confidentiality, because well, when it becomes part of the care plan, can you see? The care plan.
Poor patients.
Yeah. So I was curious, what led you to medicine in the first place? What brought you to it?
My father was a doctor. I was one of 5 daughters, and I was the one of 5 that did the best in school. So I was ordained. And I rebelled against him, and I did a lot of other things. And I was teaching in free school. I grew up in the 60s, so there was a lot of sort of tear gas in Washington, things like that. But the calling kept calling. And I ended up thinking that actually my father knew me pretty well, and it was a good call. But it was not a straight line.
You sound like a postman.
Yeah, oh yeah. Oh indeed, no, listen. I was driving the school bus and doing my pre-med courses at Rockland Community College years after I graduated. And I was not as lucky as you guys because they had nobody from Rockland Community College had ever applied to medical school, so they didn't know how to do it.
You better tell them the story of your name.
You know what Sharon is? Sharon, C-H-A-R-O-N, in Greek mythology, is the ferryman who rows the boat across the river Styx to Hades. So when you die, you get into my ferry boat, and I go to the afterlife. And it's a French name. In French, if it's spelled correctly, it means wheelwright. And indeed, I thought it was morbid, and that I needed to change my name because I had made his ordeal all worse. But I couldn't get to City Hall, and it was very complicated, and I did not change my name. But I realized, I grew to realize that it was a name that spoke to what it was I do, and to get to know that journey very well, and to get to navigate that journey was indeed what I was called to do as a child. And so instead of changing it, I'm trying since then to live up to my name. I am grateful that not many patients do recognize it, but indeed it's a North Star that guides what it is we find out. And the question is, how do you balance the creative work with the demands of people? I have a very tiny practice, and what we don't know at the beginning is how eminently valuable lives in medicine is. I mean, you can do anything, and somehow they don't tell you that. But you know, we see like the pediatric cardiologist, and you so accurately portray the kind of everything going on at once. And the stress and the tension and the conflict, all of them. There's an infinite number of ways to live a life in medicine. You can have very fine practice. You can have aspects of life that have nothing to do with medicine. I mean, with my PhD in English, I mean, I'm now writing a book on Henry James that has nothing to do with medicine. Absolutely not. But it's just my own scholarship. And the good news is that that counts. When I get promoted as in the Department of Medicine, this counts as scholarship for a physician. So we are far less narrowed and constrained than we used to be. I mean, our friends and colleagues are, one is a doctor and a historian, one is a doctor and an anthropologist. More and more doctors now are getting MFAs, fine arts degrees, right? Medicine is finding ways to acknowledge the contributions and the relationship of visual arts, the performance arts. So it's arduous and there's great demands, but it's also pluripotent. It is pluripotent. It's filled with envelopes, and so it's what it turns out to be is a matter really of making sure you have adequate support to pay your rent. Do you see? But you can keep practice small. Your research can be in a wet lab somewhere in molecular biology. Your research can also be in hermeneutical study of genesis. Do you see? It's really far more relevant of other passions and other gifts than it used to be. There's hope.